At my stepmother's lavish birthday gala, she stood before Houston's elite and screamed that I stole the family business from her daughter. Guests stared. Some even booed. Humiliated, I left in tears, only to return hours later with shocking evidence, legal firepower, and a plan to reclaim everything they tried to destroy. "Return what you stole," Vanessa's stepmother, Lorraine, shouted, her voice cracking like thunder through the high-ceilinged ballroom. The room fell into a stunned hush. Wine glasses stilled mid-air. Conversations froze mid-sentence. All eyes turned to me. Vanessa Green, 32 years old, concert pianist turned CEO. And suddenly I felt like an imposter on a stage I no longer belonged to. Just an hour ago, I had walked into the Langford Grand Hotel for Lorraine's 60th birthday celebration, dressed in navy silk and hope. It had been a year since my father's death and I'd taken her invitation as an olive branch. But it wasn't. It was a setup. "You manipulated a dying man," she accused, stepping forward in designer heels, pointing a manicured finger. "You stole my daughter's birthright." Behind her, my stepsister Madeline offered a tight-lipped smirk. She hadn't cared about Green Industrial when my father was alive. Never sat in on a meeting, never toured the factory. Now suddenly, she stood with righteous entitlement burning in her eyes. I opened my mouth, trying to steady my voice. "Dad's will," he made it clear. "He wanted." He was confused. "And you took advantage," Lorraine snapped. Whispers slithered through the ballroom like smoke. Houston's business elite, suppliers, investors, clients I'd spent the last year building trust with, looked at me with suspicion and quiet judgment. "She showed up out of nowhere right before he passed," someone murmured. "She was always traveling, not running a company," another added. It hit like a wave. Shame. Humiliation. Rage. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to vanish. Instead I stood frozen, a flute of champagne trembling in my hand, my cheeks burning as Lorraine's voice, so polished, so controlled, painted me as a thief in front of the entire business community. "I think it's best if you leave," she said, with a smile that reeked of triumph. "No one wants a liar at this celebration." I turned and walked, each step heavier than the last. By the time I reached my car in the underground garage, I couldn't hold the tears back. They came in waves, shaking sobs that clawed through my chest as I gripped the steering wheel. My father, William Green, had built Green Industrial from scratch. After my mother passed, he married Lorraine and brought her and Madeline into our lives. 4 years, Lorraine played the part of the polished, supportive wife. But everything changed when Dad was diagnosed with cancer. He made his wishes clear. "You understand this business, Vanessa. You have vision and grit. I want you to carry it forward." I gave up my music career to honor that promise. First, Lorraine had played nice. But beneath the surface, she was orchestrating something darker. A campaign to discredit me, to reclaim the company through manipulation and appearances. And tonight, she made her boldest move yet. Public humiliation. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, my face streaked with tears, and a thought crystallized in my mind. I won't let this stand. Not tonight. Not ever. The tears were gone by the time I arrived at Bernard's law office. The city lights glinted off the glass tower like nothing had happened. But something had. Something irreversible. Bernard Wesley, my father's longtime attorney and executor of his will, buzzed me up without question. He didn't even ask if I was okay. He knew I wasn't. "I saw the live stream," he said, closing the door behind me. "She made quite a show of herself. She turned everyone against me," I said, my voice flat. "Investors, clients, even some of the board." "She wants you isolated," Bernard replied. "That's the play. She couldn't win in court, so she's winning with public opinion." I sank into the leather chair across from his desk, still clutching my bag like it was armor. "What do we do?" He gave me a long look. "Tell the truth." Loudly. Visibly. Unapologetically. He stood, walked to a cabinet and pulled out 2 thick binders. Then a third. A fourth. They thudded onto the desk like court gavels. "I started preparing these after your father passed," he explained. "Because he asked me to." William Green knew Lorraine. He knew she'd try something. He made sure you had ammunition. I flipped open the first binder. Inside were notarized documents, emails, financial statements, even photos. Everything from Dad's handwritten succession letter to training schedules he'd made for me back when I was still touring Europe as a pianist. There were meeting logs, presentation decks, my personal notes annotated by him in his own handwriting. He documented everything, I whispered. Bernard nodded. He wanted this company in your hands. He built a legal fortress around that wish. He handed me a flash drive. This has the video. The one he recorded from his hospital room. You haven't seen it, have you? No, I murmured. I didn't have the heart. Until now. He made it for this exact moment, Bernard said gently. To silence anyone who'd dare rewrite his legacy. I took a shaky breath. My fingers closed around the flash drive like it was a lifeline. We go back, I said quietly. Tonight. I nodded. Tonight. Bernard smiled. Good. Because I already called in backup. Within 20 minutes, 3 other attorneys, dressed in tailored navy suits and quiet confidence, joined us at the hotel loading zone. Bernard briefed them while I prepared packets, one for each table at the gala. Everything meticulously documented. We're not just defending you, he reminded me. We're reclaiming your narrative. As we drove back, the city blurred past in streaks of light. I felt nerves, but more than that, I felt power. Lorraine wanted me humiliated, diminished, erased. But my father had planned for this. And now I was ready to respond, not just with anger but with facts, proof, and poise. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. And I was about to walk back into that ballroom not as the disgraced daughter, but as the rightful CEO of Green Industrial, carrying her father's legacy like a sword. The Westbridge Hotel gleamed as we pulled up to the valet stand, just as it had earlier that evening. But now I wasn't walking in alone, defenseless and blindsided. I had Bernard at my side. 3 other attorneys flanked us like sentinels. And I carried proof. Truth bundled in leather binders and one flash drive that could bring the entire charade crashing down. The doorman, who had watched me flee in tears just hours ago, stepped aside without a word. His eyes widened when he saw who I was with. Inside, the gala continued in full swing. Jazz music floated across the air, waiters passed champagne, and Houston's elite smiled and laughed like nothing had happened. But the moment I stepped back into the ballroom, silence rippled outward. Conversations cut off. Eyes turned. Lorraine stood at the center of it all, framed by the cake display and surrounded by her circle of supporters. Her expression shifted from surprise to cold fury in an instant. Pamela, clinging to her arm like a shadow, whispered something urgently in her ear. "Excuse me, everyone," Bernard said, his deep voice carrying across the room like a gavel strike. "We have some important clarifications to make regarding the leadership of Green Industrial." Guests glanced around uncertainly. The quartet stopped playing. Bernard signaled his colleagues, who began distributing the prepared binders across the tables. "I am Bernard Wesley, legal counsel to the late William Green and executor of his estate. This evening, serious accusations were made against Miss Clara Green, accusations that directly contradict the legal and documented truth." I stepped up onto the small stage where the band had been playing. A violinist handed me the microphone. "When I left earlier, I was called a thief," I began. My voice rang out across the still room. I was accused of manipulating my father while he was sick, of stealing what wasn't mine. I paused, letting the tension settle. What you didn't see was the court battles Lorraine has already lost. 3 times she challenged my father's will. 3 times judges ruled against her. Bernard projected scanned images of those decisions onto a large screen behind me. Legal stamps, judges' signatures, facts that left little room for misinterpretation. "I'd like to let my father speak for himself now," I said, holding up the flash drive. A hush fell as Bernard connected it to the projector. The screen flickered and then there he was. My father. Frail but unmistakably lucid. His voice filled the room, steady and sharp as ever. "I am William Green. This is my final message regarding the future of Green Industrial." Gasps echoed around the room as he named me, Clara, as his chosen successor. His reasons were clear, methodical, and emotional. He praised my dedication, my strategy, and my deep understanding of the business. Then came footage of Pamela declining involvement. Video proof with her own words. When the screen went dark, the silence was deafening. Then I stepped forward, scanning every stunned face. I came here tonight to honor Lorraine's invitation. What I got was betrayal. What you just saw was the truth. As the lights dimmed back to normal, the ballroom remained eerily quiet. No music, no laughter, only the rustling of paper as guests flipped through the binders, rereading the testimony they'd just seen on screen. The change in atmosphere was immediate. Gone were the sneers and whispers. In their place, disbelief, discomfort, and dawning realization. Near the back, Mr. Harrington, CEO of our second-largest supplier, stood up. "Clara," he said, his voice carrying clearly, "I owe you an apology. I should never have assumed the worst without asking you directly." His words broke the ice. Other voices joined in. Soft, hesitant apologies. Nods of support. Some guests even began clapping, slow but building. In that moment, the narrative Lorraine had tried so desperately to craft was unraveling publicly. Lorraine, however, wasn't ready to surrender. She tried to push forward, but Bernard's colleagues quietly blocked her path. "This is outrageous," she barked. "This is my birthday and she's hijacked it with lies." I turned toward her, calmly but firmly. "Interesting, Lorraine. You called me a thief in front of hundreds of people, on your birthday no less. I'm simply responding with the truth. And the truth, unfortunately for you, has documentation." "You manipulated him when he was sick," Pamela interjected, her voice trembling, eyes darting to the screen as if wishing the video hadn't existed. "He was dying. You took advantage." Bernard stepped forward holding a tablet. "Actually, according to hospital logs, Clara visited Mr. Green 87 times during his final 6 months. You, Pamela, visited him 12 times. Lorraine, you were there 30. Pamela's mouth opened, then closed. No words came. Lorraine's cheeks flushed crimson, but she said nothing. "The company was meant to secure our future," Lorraine muttered at last, her voice low but bitter. "William promised we'd always be taken care of. And he kept that promise," I replied. "His will includes generous trusts for both of you. You're not hurting financially. What he didn't do was leave you control, because he knew what would happen to his company if he did." There was no fight left in her eyes. Just resentment and the fading glow of someone who had spent their life depending on power borrowed from others. "This isn't over," Lorraine spat, grabbing Pamela's wrist and storming toward the exit. "Oh, but it is," Bernard called after her smoothly. "Any further legal action will be considered frivolous and subject to sanctions under vexatious litigation statutes." As they disappeared through the double doors, the tension lifted from the room like a physical weight. Several guests made their way to the stage, offering congratulations, shaking my hand, some even asking about business proposals. Gregory Lane, the CFO of our largest client, said with a quiet smile, "You just turned the worst night of your life into a masterclass in leadership." I smiled, humbled but vindicated. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was carrying my father's legacy. I felt like I was shaping it. The rest of the evening played out in stark contrast to how it began. Guests who had once avoided eye contact now circled back to speak with me, apologizing, asking thoughtful questions, extending invitations to collaborate. The air had changed. Not only had I cleared my name, I had stepped into my father's shoes in a way that was public, undeniable, and frankly irreversible. Bernard stood off to the side, watching the room with quiet satisfaction. When I joined him near the refreshment table, he raised his glass. "Your father would have been proud of you, Clara. That was an elegant execution." "Elegant wasn't the word I was thinking," I said with a laugh. "But thank you, Bernard, for everything." As the night wound down, several industry leaders pulled me aside, not just to commend me, but to initiate real business conversations. Gregory Lane confirmed that their company would be renewing its multi-year contract with Green Industries, with an expansion clause. 2 other former clients who had distanced themselves in recent months asked for meetings that same week. A third offered introductions to potential overseas partners. The gala, meant to humiliate me, had instead turned into a showcase of strength and legitimacy. Back at my apartment later that night, I placed the now iconic binders on my bookshelf, next to the framed photo of my father at the Green Industries ribbon-cutting ceremony. His expression in that photo, equal parts pride and exhaustion, looked back at me like a knowing nod. "This was just the first battle, wasn't it?" I whispered. The following week, Pamela showed up at my office. She looked different, less polished, more vulnerable. No smugness, no entourage, no Lorraine shadowing her. "I need a job," she said, skipping all pleasantries. "Mom's burned through most of her savings fighting the will. And my trust doesn't mature for another 2 years." I studied her for a moment, skeptical but not unkind. "Why me, Pamela? After everything that happened?" She glanced around my office, then met my eyes. "Because you're the only one who's actually succeeding. Everyone else from Mom's circle is just pretending." Against Bernard's cautious advice, I offered her an entry-level position in marketing. To my surprise, she accepted. To my greater surprise, she showed up on time the next day, ready to learn. We weren't friends. We probably never would be. But something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness, not trust, yet. But respect. And that was enough to start. As for Lorraine, she left town shortly after the gala. Rumors swirled that she'd moved to Arizona to pursue her next wealthy target. I didn't bother confirming. Some stories are better left unfinished. Back at Green Industries, I established new protocols for succession planning and leadership transparency. No more silent inheritance, no more assumptions. I began mentoring 2 promising department leads, just as my father had mentored me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about stewardship, about building something worth passing on when the time came. 6 months passed, and with them came the transformation of both Green Industries and myself. The Houston business community, once so quick to judge, had done more than just change their tune. They'd become vocal advocates. Green Industries was now being held up as a model of ethical leadership and smart succession. We'd launched 2 new product lines, hired 35 new staff members, and opened a second facility in Austin. That growth wasn't just a response to demand. It was the result of something deeper: trust. Partners trusted me. Employees trusted me. Even Pamela, now 3 months into her role in marketing, had stopped glancing over her shoulder. She was contributing meaningfully, suggesting social campaigns, organizing community outreach. Sometimes I caught her staying late, eyes focused on a spreadsheet instead of Instagram. That meant more than she probably realized. And I had changed too. Leadership was no longer something I wore like borrowed clothing, stiff and uncertain. It fit now. I understood budgets the way I used to understand sheet music, intuitively. I recognized morale shifts in staff like key changes in a composition. I'd become fluent in business in a way my father always believed I could be, though even I hadn't dared to hope. Still, music hadn't left me. Late at night, when the office lights dimmed and the factory hummed in the background, I would sit at the grand piano I had moved into our executive lounge, a sleek, black Steinway that once belonged to my mother. I closed my eyes and play. Not for an audience. Not for applause. But for balance. For peace. It was during one of these late-night sessions that the idea for the Thomas Green Foundation came to me. I would honor both sides of my heritage, the business mind my father nurtured and the artist soul I inherited from my mother. By month's end, the foundation was officially launched, combining business mentorship programs for underrepresented youth with access to music education in underfunded schools. It wasn't a PR move. It was a promise to myself and to the future. At the launch event, I gave my first public performance since taking over Green Industries. I played my father's favorite Chopin nocturne, standing under a banner that read, "Legacy Earned." As I hit the final note, a quiet applause swelled. It wasn't loud, but it was sincere. My employees, my mentors, the same clients who had once doubted me, they were all there bearing witness. When I stepped off the small stage, Pamela was the first to meet me. "You were really good," she said, almost shy. "Thanks," I replied, smiling. "You know, Dad used to say music and business weren't that different. Both require rhythm, discipline, timing, and a little improvisation," she added, surprising me. "Exactly," I said. And for once we didn't feel like opponents. Just 2 people carrying a name, each in our own way. The months following the launch of the Thomas Green Foundation cemented everything I had worked for. Not just as CEO, but as my father's daughter in every sense of the word. Public perception had fully shifted. Green Industries was no longer just the company Venus saved. It became the symbol of reinvention, of dignity reclaimed. National business outlets picked up the story. A segment on morning television titled, "The CEO Who Fought Back with Proof, Not Pettiness" aired, and for once the narrative wasn't about drama, it was about resolve. But not everyone faded quietly. Judith tried to mount one final challenge. A rumor began circulating in one of Houston's industry newsletters that the board had been pressured to reinstate me out of fear of bad press. It was subtle, clearly planted, but it reached me. So I responded the only way I knew how, with facts. We hosted a public board meeting and invited select media outlets. I stood at the podium, shared quarterly numbers, year-over-year growth and expansion milestones. Then I turned to a slide that read, "Sustained success requires truth at its core." I didn't mention Judith. I didn't need to. After that, her efforts crumbled. And Pamela stayed. Over time, we found something resembling mutual respect. She never apologized directly, but her behavior spoke louder. She worked hard, asked questions, and stopped looking for shortcuts. Maybe she still wished the outcome had been different, but at least now she was trying to earn something rather than inherit it. One crisp fall morning, we were walking through the new production wing when she asked, "Do you ever miss performing full-time?" I thought about the concert halls, the international tours, the adrenaline of applause, and then I thought about the job offers I'd turned down, the teams I now led, the quiet sound of piano keys late at night after a day of meaningful work. "Sometimes," I said honestly, "but this feels like the performance I was meant to give." She nodded, and for the first time I saw understanding in her eyes. That afternoon, I received a call from the Houston Chamber of Commerce. They wanted to name Green Industries Company of the Year and invite me to speak at the city's economic summit. I accepted, not out of pride, but because I wanted to stand before that same audience who once doubted me and show them what quiet strength and preparation can achieve. The night of the summit, I walked on stage in a navy suit, my father's favorite color, carrying a USB drive in my pocket. It didn't hold legal documents or secret recordings. It held a single video, my father explaining in his own words why I was the one to lead. I played it after my speech, not because I needed proof anymore, but because I wanted the world to know that this story didn't end with betrayal or vengeance. It ended with clarity, with purpose, and with a daughter who didn't just inherit a legacy. She rebuilt it note by note,